My name is Chelsea Ward. I'm 36 years old, and according to my family, I've been a disappointment since birth. I grew up in one of those small towns where everyone knows your grandparents, your business, and what you had for lunch 3 Sundays ago. It looks charming on postcards: white picket fences, church bells on Sunday, kids riding bikes until the streetlights come on. But when you're the family let down in a place like that, it feels less like a town and more like a glass box. Everyone can see you, judge you, and gossip about you in the cereal aisle. I'm the middle child of three. My parents are textbook conservative and deeply religious. Dad's the strong, silent type, always working, never talking about feelings. Feelings, in his world, are something you bite down on until your jaw aches. Mom is the traditional homemaker, the kind who quotes how she was raised like it's scripture. She keeps the house spotless, the meals hot, and her opinions on my life even hotter. They never came right out and said, "Chelsea, you're the family failure." They didn't have to. It was there in the sighs, the glances they exchanged over my head, the way my name only came up as a cautionary tale. My older sister, Allison, is 40 and practically made out of gold-plated expectations. She married this quiet, pretty man who smiles a lot but never really says anything. They have 2 boys who treat contact sports like a religion and bruises like trophies. Allison sells cars at the local dealership and talks about it like she's saving the world one SUV at a time. She loves to lean on the edge of her chair at Sunday dinners and tell me how to get my life together, which is funny because she has no idea what my life actually looks like. To her, I'm still the weird middle kid who cries too easily and can't catch a football. Then there's my younger brother, Josh, the baby of the family. I moved out when he hit his teenage years, so most of what I know about him now comes from adulthood. He's not a bad guy. He's just soft, pampered. It's easier for him to laugh along when my parents and Allison take jabs at me than risk becoming the target himself. He got married at 19, had a huge, glittering wedding. The whole town talked about for weeks, and now he has 3 kids. Of Josh's children, it's his middle kid I feel closest to. She's the one who gets picked on, who fades into the background while her older and younger siblings soak up the praise. When I look at her, I see a younger version of myself, confused, overlooked, and trying to pretend it doesn't hurt. Growing up, I was too emotional, too sensitive, too dramatic. I had asthma, but my parents whispered that it was just me being weak. I suffered from depression before I could spell the word. While other kids sprinted across the field without thinking, I was wheezing on the sidelines, trying not to cry where anyone could see. My parents didn't really believe asthma was real. Depression? Even less so. To them, I just needed to toughen up and pray harder. School was survivable, I guess. I wasn't dumb, but I wasn't a star either. I limped through high school with a 2.5 GPA and 0 confidence. I forced my way into college on stubbornness more than anything else, but by the second year, I was exhausted and broke. Dropping out was the only option that made sense. In my family, that decision turned into my defining trait. Allison, the college graduate and sales superstar. Chelsea, the college dropout who couldn't hack it. After that, I leaned hard into who I really was, an introverted, nerdy mess who preferred comic books and video games to tailgates and church picnics. I got a job at a local gaming and comic shop, and for a while it was heaven. I knew the regulars, could recommend titles by memory, and felt like I belonged. Then the store closed, over 7 years ago. You'd think my family would understand that the game shop closed means I do not work there anymore. But no. To this day, they still talk like I'm standing behind that dusty counter, ringing up trading cards for kids with sticky fingers. What they don't know, because I never told them, is what came after. One of my regulars at the shop was another tech-obsessed nerd with more ambition than social skills. We bonded over broken consoles and bad Wi-Fi, and eventually, we started a tech support business together. It started small, fixing Granny's laptop, debugging home routers, explaining to people why password 123 was a terrible idea. But it grew. We got better clients, bigger contracts. Long story short, a larger corporation took notice and bought our company out. I walked away with a mix of cash and stock options. Those stocks did well, shockingly well. I reinvested, started a few small side businesses, and before I really let myself believe it, I had assets worth over $1 million. These days, I'm the CTO of a private startup, working in cybersecurity. I live in a modest two-bedroom house in a good neighborhood. I drive a 15-year-old Saturn I'm absurdly fond of, and all my furniture is secondhand. You'd never look at my life and think wealthy, and that's exactly how I like it. I see a therapist regularly. I'm also fighting alcoholism, which is its own kind of war. My parents don't believe in that either. Just stop drinking, my mom said once over the phone, like she was advising me to change shampoos. All of this, the businesses, the therapy, the late nights worrying about relapse, none of it exists in my family's version of reality. In their heads, I'm still Chelsea the screw-up, wiping fingerprints off game cases at a store that no longer exists. And yet every Sunday they expect me at dinner. They live on the other side of the state, so getting there is a 90 to 120-minute drive each way. By the time I get back home, half my weekend is gone. But to them, I'm single, unstable, and clearly have nothing better to do. Those dinners are torture. 3 hours of Allison bragging about her latest big sale at the dealership, her boys' latest sports injuries like they're badges of honor, my parents nodding along like she's cured cancer. Then it's my turn. Have you thought about getting a real job, Chelsea? Have you considered settling down? You're not getting any younger. They've never called me a moocher outright, but the implication hangs in the air. Thick, sour, impossible to ignore. The truth is, I used to keep going because some part of me still wanted their approval. Another part didn't want to be the villain in the story they tell the town. But everything changed last month. Somehow, Allison got hold of my personal information. Not just my address, that's easy. No, this was my social security number, my employment records, my financial footprint. With my parents' help, she hired a private investigator, pretending it was for an employment background check. I only found out because I got alerts about unauthorized attempts to pull my credit report. In my line of work, unauthorized is a word that makes my blood run cold. I followed the trail, put two and two together, and realized exactly what had happened. They didn't trust me enough to simply ask, "Chelsea, how are you really doing?" They decided to investigate me. I was so furious I could hardly breathe. So I did something that surprised even me. I called the same PI agency, and I hired them to investigate my family. 2 weeks later, a thick, neatly stapled report landed in my mailbox. I sat at my kitchen table, hands shaking, and opened it. Page after page detailed Allison's life. The DUIs, the public drunkenness charges, the domestic disturbance calls, the file with Child Protective Services, the 3 mortgages, the IRS payment plan, the wrecked credit score. There was a section on my parents. Modest, predictable, nothing shocking. I didn't even bother to look up my younger brother. By the time I finished reading, my anger had settled into something colder, heavier. They wanted to dig into my life? Fine. Now I knew exactly what theirs looked like. The next Sunday dinner was already on the calendar. I stared at the report on my table, the family secrets laid bare in black and white, and I made a decision. I was going, and I wasn't going to play the family disappointment anymore. The Sunday after that report arrived, I pulled into my parents' driveway with the folder sitting on the passenger seat like a live grenade. Their house looked exactly the same as it had my entire life. Neatly trimmed lawn, porch swing, faded "Bless this home" sign by the door. It was almost funny how ordinary it all seemed when I knew what was printed in black and white in that folder. I sat there for a moment with the engine off, listening to it tick as it cooled. Part of me wanted to throw the car into reverse and vanish. Another part, colder, steadier, tightened its grip on the steering wheel. "You didn't start this," I told myself, "but you're going to finish it." I grabbed the report, slid it into my tote bag, and went inside. "Chelsea!" Mom sang out from the kitchen the minute I opened the door, like nothing had ever been wrong between us. She wiped her hands on a floral dish towel and came toward me, that brittle smile glued to her face. "We didn't think you'd make it, honey." "Hi, Mom." I kissed her cheek. Her perfume smelled the same, powdery and cloying, a scent from my childhood that used to mean comfort. Now it just made me feel like I was walking into a play where everyone else had already memorized their lines. Dad was in his usual spot in the living room, half watching sports, half pretending not to listen to everything. He looked up, cleared his throat. "Chelsea." "Hey, Dad." Then Allison appeared from the dining room, wearing a blazer like she'd just stepped off a car commercial. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," she said. "Busy schedule at the—" She paused, almost as if she remembered the comic shop had been closed for years, then barreled on. With whatever it is you're doing now. Something like that, I replied. Josh and his wife were already seated at the table, along with their 3 kids. His middle daughter, Mia, perked up when she saw me. "Aunt Chelsea," she chirped, then glanced at her parents like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be that excited. "Hey, kiddo," I said, ruffling her hair lightly. "Good to see you." We all migrated toward the dining room, falling into the familiar choreography. Mom fussing over the food, Dad shuffling to his spot at the head of the table, Allison arranging her sons at her sides like accessories, Josh taking the far corner. I took my usual place in the middle, where everyone could see me and pretend not to. For the first 30 minutes, dinner was exactly what it always was. Allison talked about a record week of commissions. "The dealership's never seen numbers like this," she said, flipping her hair. "Honestly, they'd be lost without me." Dad grunted approvingly. "That's my girl." Mom beamed. "You always were such a go-getter." I buttered my roll and listened. "So, Chelsea," Mom said eventually, turning that practiced smile on me, "how's work?" "It's good," I said. "Busy." "Still at that computer thing?" Dad asked. Like it was a phase I'd grow out of, like My Little Pony obsession. "Yeah, Dad, still at that." Allison snorted into her wine. "You know, if you ever want real job advice, I could talk to my manager. We're always looking for people who can, deal with customers face to face." She said it in that way she always did, helpful on the surface, but underneath, it dripped with the assumption that I was barely holding my life together. I took a sip of water, trying not to smile, if she only knew. It would have been so easy to let the evening play out like usual. To nod, swallow the insults, drive home, and scream into my pillow. That's what the old version of me would have done. But my tote bag weighed against my leg like a reminder. When Mom finally set dessert on the table and everyone reached for plates, I cleared my throat. "I actually wanted to talk to you all about something," I said. The room went quiet except for the clink of a spoon. Allison raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" I reached into my bag, pulled out the neatly stapled report, and set it in the middle of the table. A few pages fanned out, just enough for the header to be visible. The name of the private investigation agency, printed in bold. Allison's face went white. Dad's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Mom's hand tightened around the dessert knife. "I thought this agency sounded familiar," I said calmly. "Turns out it is." Allison recovered first. "What is this, some kind of joke?" "No joke," I replied. "You hired them first." Mom sputtered. "Chelsea, what are you talking about?" I looked directly at Allison. "You hired a private investigator to run a fake employer background check on me. You used my social security number." I turned to my parents. "Which you had to provide." Dad's eyes darted to Mom. Mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. Allison scoffed. "That's ridiculous. We were just concerned. You never tell us anything. We thought you might be in trouble." "In trouble?" I said. "Or just not living the story you wanted to tell people about me?" Silence. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. Years of therapy were doing overtime. "So," I continued, tapping the file, "since you were so interested in my life, I thought it was only fair to get the full picture of yours." I flipped the first page open. The words jumped up at me, familiar now. Dates, charges, balances, interest accrued. "Allison," I said, "it looks like you've had a couple of rough nights." Her jaw clenched. "What are you implying?" "2 DWIs, public drunkenness, domestic disturbance calls," I read off casually. "And then there's the 3 mortgages on your house, the back payments to the IRS, and a credit score that's, well, let's just say it's not something to brag about at dinner." Josh's wife inhaled sharply. Josh stared down at his plate like he could will himself invisible. "Is this true?" Mom gasped, rounding on Allison. "Of course it's not," Allison snapped. "She's twisting things. You know how dramatic Chelsea gets. She's always been like this." I slid a copy of the summary page toward Mom and Dad. They both leaned in, eyes scanning the neat, impersonal lines. The color drained out of Mom's face. "Good agency, by the way," I added. "Thorough." "You had no right," Allison shouted, slamming her hand on the table. The dishes rattled. The kids flinched. "Funny," I said quietly. "I was going to say the same thing to you." For a moment, everyone shouted at once. Mom was demanding explanations. Dad protested that they only agreed to the background check because they were worried. Allison insisted the PI must have made mistakes. Josh muttered something about not wanting to be involved. It felt like standing in the middle of a hurricane. I sat back and watched the storm. This was my family, stripped of their rehearsed niceties. Every petty resentment, every buried grudge from 20 or 30 years ago came roaring out. My parents started blaming each other. "You always coddled her." "Well, you were never home. This is your fault." No, yours? Allison tried to drag me into it. Look what you've done, Chelsea. You just had to make everything about you, didn't you? You couldn't stand that someone was trying to help you. I shrugged, if that's what you want to call it. At one point, Mom whirled on me. How could you dig into your sister's life like this? She's family. Then why didn't that matter when you were digging into mine? I asked. Her mouth opened, closed, no answer. The kids sat in stunned silence at the far end of the table. Mia's eyes were wide and shiny. Allison's boys stared at their plates like they were afraid to move. Josh's youngest picked at a roll, not understanding but feeling everything. For a split second, watching their small, confused faces, a wave of guilt washed over me. I hadn't meant for them to see this. I hadn't meant for them to learn who their parents really were in one brutal, messy scene. You wanted the truth, something inside me whispered. This is what it looks like. The argument hit a fever pitch when Allison, cornered and furious, turned her full rage on me. This is all your fault, she screamed, leaning across the table. You've been nothing but a burden since the day you were born. You should never have been born, Chelsea. The room went deadly silent. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to hold its breath. I felt the words hit me like a physical blow, time folding in on itself. Suddenly, I was 8 years old again, hiding in my room, listening to muffled voices through the door, wondering what I'd done wrong just by existing. Mom grabbed Allison's arm. Allison, that's enough. Dad growled, watch your mouth. It was the first time I'd seen them panic on my behalf, not because they realized the damage they'd done over the years, but because, for a moment, they looked afraid of what I might do with what had just been said. They weren't protecting me. They were protecting themselves. Something in me finally loosened. I see, I said softly. Thanks for clearing that up. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the floor, loud in the quiet room. Where do you think you're going? Mom snapped, as if we were back in high school and I'd just been sent to my room. Home, I said. And for the record, I'm done with these Sunday dinners. You can't just walk out, Dad barked. I can, I replied, and I am. That's when Mom threw the last card on the table. You're really going to abandon your own family when you could help? She demanded. When your niece is sick and you refuse to do anything? I stopped, turned slowly. What? She lifted her chin. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You could pay for treatments. You have money, Chelsea. You just choose not to use it for family. I stared at her. No one has ever told me any of this. Allison crossed her arms. Oh, please, don't pretend you care now. You don't even show up half the time. I studied their faces, the dramatic hurt, the righteous anger. It struck me how much of this sounded made up on the spot. No concrete details, no diagnoses, no actual requests. Just a vague accusation meant to paint me as the villain. I let out a breath that was half a laugh. Interesting, I said, because last I checked, you still thought I worked at a comic book store that closed in 2011. I've mentioned that, 3 times? You never listened then. But now I'm somehow rich enough to be your personal ATM? Dad flinched at the word rich. Mom's eyes darted away, like I'd caught her stealing. I shook my head. You rewrote my entire life in your head so you could feel better about yourselves, and now that the story changed, you're scrambling to adjust. No one had an answer for that. I looked over at the kids one last time. Mia watched me like I was stepping through a door she desperately wanted to see on the other side. I gave her the smallest nod, a silent promise that I'd still be around, for her, if not for them. Then I picked up my bag, tucked the report back inside, and walked out. The evening air hit me like a shock. I got into my old Saturn, shut the door, and just sat there with my hands on the wheel, heart racing. You did it, I thought. You finally walked away. Driving home felt like leaving a battlefield. The road was dark and mostly empty, just me and the hum of the engine and the echo of Allison's words, "You should never have been born," bouncing around in my skull. I expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, maybe even satisfied. Instead, I felt hollow. Because here was the truth I hadn't wanted to face. I knew they weren't good for me. I knew they didn't see me. But I still hadn't really understood until that night just how little they valued me beyond what I could provide. The next day, I booked an emergency session with my therapist. I told her everything, the PI, the report, the dinner, the accusation about the sick niece, the way my parents' faces changed when they realized I wasn't who they thought I was. She listened quietly, then said, "Chelsea, what you did wasn't cruel. It was honest. You responded to a boundary violation with information and boundaries of your own. I feel like I nuked my entire family," I admitted. "Maybe what you nuked," she said gently, "was the illusion that they were treating you fairly." In the weeks that followed, I made some practical choices. I froze my credit. I booked a consultation with a lawyer about my will, making sure that if anything happened to me, my assets wouldn't automatically fall into the hands of the people who had spent my entire life tearing me down. And slowly, painfully, I began to imagine a future where family didn't just mean the people who shared my last name and my trauma. I didn't know it yet, but that future was already walking toward me in a conference room, under bright lights, talking about cybersecurity. His name was Evan, and he was going to help me relearn what it meant to be loved without being used.